everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of Narrative. It's good to be with you tonight. We're doing this again. We're going completely live because I am yet again blown away by what is happening in the incredible news and court case that we're seeing. Let me just quieten this one section I have up here now. This is all live, as you can tell. This is one man, one TV station, one TV show. Unlike all the guys on the other TV networks, they have lots of people to help them. I've just got me and you, and we're going to get through an incredible hour as we look through what was just incredible today. I mean, I could not be any more surprised, shocked, humbled by the news events that happened today. And for anything, if I've ever said anything bad about the Alvin Bragg prosecution team there, boy, they have done a remarkable job. And today was remarkable in itself. Now, I'm not quite there yet on Michael Cohen. I'm going to wait to see how he does on cross-examination yesterday. But boy, did Michael Cohen bring the goods today. He really did. We'll go through this in piece by piece, but in my opinion, today was just one of those bombshell days, which will go down in history as one of the remarkable days in American history where the unthinkable was done. I actually think they have laid the groundwork for a felony conviction of Donald Trump. However, we're not there yet. I'm not going to pretend that we are yet. There's many, many, many hurdles that still need to be overcome, but we are close to getting there. And for that reason alone, we're going live tonight. Plus, I've got lots of other great tidbits I want to share with you about what I've been investigating regarding the investigation. And I want to hear from you if you have any comments or thoughts or anything like that. I am taking your comments on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@narrative.tv. That's youtube.com/@narrative.tv. We're also live on X on Twitter, where I believe we're live on X on Twitter. Are we? Oh boy, I hope we are. Let me confirm that before we continue any further here, because we want to take your comments there as well. There is it doesn't look to me like it's very live right now. So, hey, Twitter, what's up with you guys? Why can I never get you guys to work properly ever since Elon Musk took over? Is it personal? I wonder. Trying out here. Check this. I'm sorry about this delay. It happens every time with our good friends at Twitter. It says I'm live. It says I got, there I am. A bunch of you watching already. However, I can't see it for some reason. So let me, there I am. I see myself and I see my own hair, my haircut that I gave myself the other day. Okay, so you're all here. I'm glad you're here. Sorry about that delay. We're live on YouTube. You're on Substack. You're on Patreon. We're on YouTube, and we're on Twitter. And we're a little delayed. Is the problem? Was why we're a little delayed on Twitter. But it's good to be with you, regardless of where you're watching. This is your chance to opine on what happened today, and for me to share with you what I thought happened today, because today was a remarkable day in the world as we learned a lot about what happened on the way to the inauguration of all times. I mean, this is the thing which just stuns me the most about this case. This case was taking place just as the inauguration of Donald J. Trump was about to happen. Now, if you remember that day on 2016, I remember it like it was yesterday because it was a strange day. Remember, nobody showed up. For some reason, the crowds were not allowed into the area where the parade goes down. There was no crowds there. It was sort of empty for the bulk of the day. No one could ever figure out why. There was also, an inauguration event held that night, which many people later said was the event of a crime, was the place where a crime took place, where potentially, there was a attempt to bribe the Trump organization and the Trump campaign and the Trump government, or what would be the Trump administration, by foreign governments. So that was also happening that night. But now we're finding out that on the way there was also an incredible amount of criminal activity. And that involved this Stormy Daniels hush money case. So, up until now, for the first time in this case, Cohen today testified that he witnessed Donald Trump by himself, or at least, let me say this again. For the first time in this case, Michael Cohen testified that he witnessed Donald Trump in the room discussing the details of his payout. So if you remember, this case has two different distinct crimes attached to it. They're both sort of misdemeanors unless they happen together. So there's a crime where $130,000 was paid to Stormy Daniels by someone who maybe wanted to hush hush up their affair. That is a perfectly legal thing to do, by the way, paying someone $130,000 to hush up an affair. It's not necessarily a legal thing to do if you're paying $130,000 and then you're not declaring it as a campaign contribution. Well, that's something you should have done. But still, that's not a hugely serious crime. So those two things we already knew were true, that Stormy Daniels received $130,000 to keep quiet about her affair. We know that she received it from Michael Cohen on behalf of Donald Trump. That much we knew. However, the other piece of this case involves this like kind of complicated, convoluted, you have to falsify a business statement, a business record of some sort in order to be turned into a felony. What would normally be a misdemeanor, a slap on the wrist, can now become a felony because it's in the furtherance of an additional crime. So you've got the initial crime, which would have been, hey, you're giving $130,000 to someone to hush her up about the affair and not declaring it to the FEC. That's one half of it. The other half is you're falsifying the business records, and that is what's turning it into a felony. Now, we've known that there's been a falsification of the business records all along because, the $130,000 never was $130,000. It ended up being $420,000. At least that's what Michael Cohen received from the Trump Organization to compensate him for the $130,000. And we'll go through the smoking gun, so to speak, of this transaction and why we now know for sure that this was a falsified business document. $420,000 was paid to Michael Cohen for the ultimate payout of $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. So that falsification of business documents is what happens in that smoking gun. We'll show that to you in a second. We didn't know until today that Donald Trump was completely aware of it. We thought he was aware of it. We had a good idea he was aware of it, but we didn't know for sure he was aware of it. And today, Michael Cohen was able to connect the dots because he put Donald Trump in the room after that incredible statement came out. So I'm going to play you in a bit my recreation of what may have been the transcript from today. Now, unlike the big networks, I don't have access to the money to buy transcripts from the day, and I don't have reporters in the room. But through the reporting that I've seen online, I've been able to take out the salient quotes, and we've built a sort of a re-dramatization of what might be the cross-examination inside the courtroom today. In other words, what you're hearing from Michael Cohen is an actual quote from Michael Cohen. The questions in between are not direct quotes from the prosecutors, but it gives you a good sense of where we are going in this and why we are going in this direction. So keep that in mind as I play you both of those tapes, because I'm going to play you two tapes, one involving a backup around that first transaction and one involving a backup around the second. And just to reiterate myself, because I know what I'm saying is potentially a little confusing, it is for me indeed as well. So I'm going to back up here, build a little slide, if you give me just 1 second to show this to you in a slightly different way. How was your day, by the way? How's your Mother's Day? Do you all have a good Mother's Day? I hope you had a good Mother's Day. Mothers are fantastic. Boy, if you don't appreciate the one you got while you still have her, I do appreciate her, because they are the most incredible things in the world. And you're so lucky to have your mother around, if she still is. Here are these two transactions I was talking about. And I'll just slide over here a little bit. Or is there another way for me to do this? Can I do this? I'll do this. Okay. So what you're seeing here is, on the left-hand side, the initial transaction, which would have been a crime on itself, $130,000 going from Michael Cohen directly to Stormy Daniels. And this is from Donald Trump. We know it's from Donald Trump. We're aware of it being from Donald Trump. But we know that this on its own would have just been an FEC violation, because it's an undeclared contribution in kind to the Trump election campaign. Naughty, sure he's naughty, but not a felony. On the right-hand side, you see how Trump was paid out $420,000 to Michael Cohen to cover that $130,000. So that is where the falsification of a business document is, because in fact, it is a massive crime to lie about those documents in the furtherance of a crime. And we know that that's exactly what happened because, well, first of all, the checks. We know that Donald Trump signed these checks. These were $35,000 checks that were paid to Michael Cohen for legal services rendered. And then the smoking gun. This is the most important piece of evidence you've ever seen in any case. Book your spot in the Smithsonian. This is where this is going right now, because this particular statement from the First Republic Bank is how we know that this was a falsified business transaction, because in his handwriting, I'm not sure which is which, actually. I think On the right-hand side is Weisselberg's handwriting. I'm not sure which is which. I'm going to say I know. But I'll just tell you what the two things say. On the left-hand side, it says to gross up the $180,000, which is made up of $130,000, which was dedicated to paying off Stormy Daniels, plus $50,000, you see that on the right-hand side, that Michael Cohen also paid to Red Finch. So now the Trump organization owes him $180,000. Now, in order to make that look legit, make it look like real income, he needed to pay taxes on that, which is why Donald Trump and Alan Weisselberg came up with this plan. They came up with a plan to turn that into $180,000 into $360,000 by plussing it up. Plus, it turns out that Michael Cohen wasn't paid his annual bonus of $60,000. It wasn't paid enough of that annual bonus. It was paid a very minimal bonus by Donald Trump. And there you have how we got to $420,000. Now, the falsification part of that really is that they were then asking Michael Cohen to declare and to invoice their organization for that $180,000 times two, $360,000 plus the $60,000 bonus plus as a business, as a legal expenses. They were paying him as a legal retainer now that he was no longer going to be at the Trump organization, that he was going to be on legal retainer. This, however, is not the case. He was not actually being paid for being on legal retainer. This was actually just the money that he was owed. And so this leads us to today's testimony. Really interesting stuff. Again, this is a recreation. I'm a one-man shop over here, so whenever I do something, I just do the best I can. But I really wanted you to hear some of what the back and forth sounded like. I do not have the full transcript until tomorrow evening, and I know some of the networks have the full transcript. Good for them. I do not. So I am going to play this to you in two pieces. The first piece, it describes this incredible moment that after completing this this notation on this smoking gun of a document, this First Republic Bank document, after writing these two notes saying, hey, it's going to be $180,000 because we're going to include the $50,000, and then we're going to gross it up to $360,000. On top of that, we're going to add $60,000. We're going to get to $420,000. That is what leads us to this next piece of tape, as we hear from Michael Cohen about what happened next with this recreation of what happened in court today. Take a listen, and we'll be back on the other side of this.
Mr. Cohen, did Donald Trump call you right before New Year's while you were on vacation with your family?
Yes, he did. On the call, Mr. Trump told me that next year I should come to Mar-a-Lago and said, "Don't worry about that other thing. I'm going to take care of it when I get back," referencing my bonus.
After the new year, what did you do regarding getting repaid for the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
I went to former Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg about getting repaid. He said to me, "Let's do it." Mr. Weisselberg asked for a copy of the statement reflecting the $130,000 transfer, which I provided.
Is this the First Republic wire transfer document with Alan Weisselberg's handwriting?
Yes, that's the copy that Mr. Weisselberg took handwritten notes on, calculating what Mr. Trump owed me based on our conversations. I was in the room when Mr. Weisselberg wrote on the document.
What did you think about the accounting being used?
I didn't really think about it. I just wanted to get my money back.
After the meeting, what happened next?
Mr. Weisselberg and I went to Mr. Trump's office to speak to him about it. I recall Mr. Weisselberg telling me $420,000 would be paid over 12 months for legal services rendered.
Did Mr. Weisselberg tell Mr. Trump that you were going to receive $420,000 over the course of 12 months?
Yes.
Was Mr. Trump there when Mr. Weisselberg said those monthly payments to you were going to be like a retainer for legal services?
Yes.
Was this payment for future legal services?
That was what it was designed to be.
What was it actually?
Reimbursement of my money.
What did Mr. Weisselberg tell you about the repayments?
He stated to me, "Each month just send an invoice to us and just mark down for legal services rendered pursuant to the agreement, and we'll get you a check out."
Did you expect to be paid for being Mr. Trump's personal attorney?
No, ma'am. I was proud to accept that title, which I wanted, so I knew there would be no compensation for any other work. I never put together a retainer agreement for any future work for Mr. Trump because I knew there was going to be no compensation. This was not related to the $420,000 payment I was receiving from the Trump Organization.
Mr. Cohen, did Donald Trump call you right before New Year's?
So that's the recreation, if you will, of what we think happened in court today. Again, I don't know the full transcripts. The answers are the answers that that Michael Cohen used in court. The questions are a bit of a guess because we're trying to make up a transcript there that you can actually hear the back and forth. But you can hear the importance of these two discoveries today. The most key thing that we discovered today is that Donald Trump was aware of this agreement to pay Michael Cohen $420,000 instead of the original $130,000 that he had paid Stormy Daniels. And so that's a significant new piece of information which changes everything, because now that we know that Donald Trump was in the room, and we know that that business document was in fact a falsified business document, and we know that he signed it, and we know that he signed the checks for that $420,000 for 12 months after the fact. Well, now it puts Donald Trump in the room with Michael Cohen and Mr. Weisselberg at the very moment that they were conceiving of a way to falsify these business documents, to lie about the taxes that needed to be paid in it, and lie essentially about this contribution to their campaigns, which would in fact have put Donald Trump's campaign into a territory where he was giving himself extra money to win this particular election. And he was doing so illegally, because that is not the way the rules work. So again, I've emphasized this point a couple of times. When we talk about this case not being significant in the past, I've said, I've thought this, why is this significant? I've been one of those people who's been one of these skeptics about this case, saying, how is this important to, in its weight? Is this really an important enough case on which to send Donald Trump to prison? And of course it is, because this is the essential crime. This is it, people. This is what Donald Trump did in order to win the 2016 elections. It's very arguable that without this payment of $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, that was plussed up to $420,000 from Trump to Michael Cohen, that he would not have won that election, that Stormy Daniels would have done an interview on ABC News just before the election and declared what was clearly at least an encounter, maybe even some people suggest could have been even more than an encounter, where she and the president of the United States almost 18 years earlier had this encounter or affair. Sorry about the sirens in the background. It is a noisy night here because I've left the windows open. It's so warm in here, which also explains why I might be perspiring a little bit. But you get my point. This is why this crime is actually the perfect crime, as complicated as it is, and as much of a skeptic as I've been about this case. If they're actually able to bring this one home, it's super significant, because this is the whole thing. He shouldn't have won the 2016 election. And had he not won the 2016 election, think about how much of history would have been different over the last 8 years. Just think about the amount of correct history we would have had, instead of this deviation on the space-time continuum that Donald Trump took us on over the last 8 years. So significant news tonight. And that's why we're live, because, I've had things to say about Michael Cohen. I've had plenty of negative things to say about Michael Cohen. He might be halfway there to redeeming himself tonight. I'll explain that a little bit further on later on, but he certainly came through in a big way today. We'll see how he does in his testimony tomorrow. All right, let's play you the second part of this tape. So now we're going to play a tape. We're going to look at other piece of testimony. Again, this is a recreation of the transcript. This is not the actual transcript. Please don't yell at me later on saying, you change the questions or whatever. I know I had to, because I was trying to fill in some of the blanks here. But we're going to take you back to exactly what happened around the Stormy Daniels tape. Now, was the Stormy Daniels agreement, at least. As I was explaining to you in the last few days of the election campaign, when Donald Trump was about to become the president of the United States, there were a couple of bombshells that hit. You'll remember the Access Hollywood bombshell tape. That tape, grab her by the pussy, whatever it was ready to just annihilate Donald Trump. He was basically on life support at that point. Somehow he survived that, and he survived that because of two things. One of them has not been discussed at great length, and we'll do that on another show. There was an attack, or a release, I should say, of some of the hacked material from the DNC servers that was done by the GRU, by the Russian intelligence services, the GRU. In order to retaliate for the Access Hollywood tape, they released a lot of damning information, supposedly from Hillary Clinton's servers, about the DNC and about how the hacked emails from the DNC. So that was one way of disrupting the Access Hollywood thing. There was something else coming down the pike which we didn't know about at the time, which was this Stormy Daniels interview. She had given up on her negotiations with Michael Cohen and Donald Trump because they had not, in fact, paid her the $130,000 that they'd promised, because they weren't intending to pay her the $130,000. They were just going to try stall until the elections, and after the elections, they wouldn't really care if she was paid or not. So they made this obligation to her. She caught wind of that. She understood that they were not paying her because there was some sort of scheme not to pay her. And so instead, she was going to do an interview with ABC that night. That would have caused chaos, absolute chaos in the election. And Donald Trump would have had a heavy price to pay, because there's no ways, I don't think, with that information coming up on the heels of the Access Hollywood tape, that we would have in fact seen Donald Trump elected president. Even though, it was this close election, as close as anything, I just don't see that would have been the case. So how did we get there? Well, this is Michael Cohen's retelling today, recreated in his own words, but through our recreation here. So again, take this as a recreation, not as the actual transcript. And let's listen to exactly how the Stormy Daniels fiasco unfolded inside the Trump Organization.
When did you first learn about Stormy Daniels' story?
I first learned about Stormy Daniels' story in 2011 when I worked with Keith Davidson to get the Dirty Com to remove a blog post about the alleged account.
How did you learn in 2016 that Stormy Daniels was looking to sell her story about Donald Trump?
In 2016, National Enquirer editor Dylan Howard told me that Stormy Daniels was out looking to sell her story about Donald Trump. I spoke with David Pecker and Howard about the Radar story, and that's when I learned Daniels was looking to sell her story.
What did you do after learning this information?
I immediately went to Mr. Trump's office and told him, "Boss, I gotta speak to you." I told him what I learned and that we needed to take care of it. He said, "Absolutely. Do it. Take care of it."
What did Trump tell you about meeting Stormy Daniels?
That quarterback Ben Roethlisberger was also there. He said, "Women prefer Mr. Trump even over someone like Big Ben."
What was the purpose of forming Resolution Consultants LLC?
I formed Resolution Consultants LLC a week prior to buying Stormy Daniels' life rights. I told Dylan Howard about the LLC because it was what would be used for the acquisition.
Did you keep Trump informed?
Yes, I kept Trump informed about the Stormy Daniels situation. That was what I always did, keep him abreast of everything.
How did Trump react?
Trump was mad when I informed him. He said, "I thought you had this under control. I thought you took care of this. Just take care of it." He told me, "Women are going to hate me. Guys may think it's cool, but this is going to be a disaster for the campaign. This is a disaster, a total disaster." He told me to work with David Pecker and get control over this.
What did Trump want you to do?
Trump wanted the Stormy Daniels situation under wraps until after the election. He said, "I want you to just push it out as long as you can just get past the election. Because if I win, it will have no relevance because I'm president. And if I lose, I don't even care."
What did Trump say when you raised Melania?
When I asked how things were going upstairs, Trump said, "How long do you think I'll be on the market for? Not long." He wasn't thinking about Melania. This was all about the campaign.
What were the terms of the agreement with Stormy Daniels?
By October 11, 2016, Keith Davidson and I had already agreed on the terms of the agreement, including the $130,000 sum and the liquidated damages clause of $1 million per violation, which was my idea. I was the only person who would retain the side letter agreement to ensure that the information would never get out.
What were your instructions regarding the timing of the agreement?
I had asked for a 10-day delay to get the funds together for Stormy Daniels' agreement, and then planned to delay again, which is what I was instructed to do. Push it past Election Day.
Push it past Election Day. That's what we keep hearing as the core reason that Michael Cohen was directed by his by Donald Trump to do. He was not had no intention of paying Stormy Daniels the $130,000. They just thought they would get away with it by postponing it till past the election day. It's so Trump, it's so gross, so disgusting. But that is, we've come to know Michael Cohen. We've come to know Donald Trump as this is the kind of games they've played throughout their entire careers. This is not a surprise to anyone who's dealt with these two. So, the fact that they were going to try to rip off Stormy Daniels in the last few days by lying to the electorate for about what she was alleging about them, that's not a surprise to any of us. But hearing it out there in court today, boy, do you hear it. And then, of course, you realize that Michael Cohen himself was going to get stiffed for that amount by Donald Trump through the later testimony. I'm not quite sure what he pulled to get that changed and actually get the $420,000. But it seems to me that between the weeds there, Michael Cohen wasn't going to get paid anything for the $420,000 or at least $130,000 he had taken out of his home bank account or lending account for his home loan to then pay off Stormy Daniels on behalf of Donald Trump. So significant there. The other thing that you heard there, super, super significant, is the Melania defense breaks apart. There is a slight theme. We've heard it in Hope Hicks's testimony. We've heard it in other people's testimony that they're going to argue, the Trump side, the defense is going to argue that this Melania defense is really what made him pay the $130,000 to Stormy Daniels as hush money, was that he did not want to upset Melania by the revelation of this affair, this porn star. Nonsense. Of course, that's not what he cared about. It's not what he's ever cared about. And in this testimony, he tells Michael Cohen, hey, listen, Michael, I only want this to get past the election. Afterwards, I don't care if she gets paid, and I don't care if it comes out. It's mute at that point. So there was no interest on Michael Cohen's behalf, or certainly Donald Trump's behalf, to be concerned about Melania, even though Michael Cohen does ask, what's going on with the situation upstairs. This is what we hear. And in fact, later on, we discovered that the locker room line that Melania suggested they use to cover up all of this was communicated to Michael Cohen when he was in London, which basically gives us a sense that Melania was a co-conspirator in all of this, hardly a victim, but a co-conspirator. It would be nice to hear from her on the stand. Of course, we never will. And we'll likely never hear from Alan Weisselberg, who's also the other person who was in the room who could help shed some light about what happened. But, we know what happened, right? It's just a question of whether the jury will believe all of this as being completely, signed, sealed, and delivered. And one of the things that the defense is going to allege tomorrow in cross-examination is that, in fact, Michael Cohen was paid for legal services rendered to the tune of $420,000 after leaving the campaign, because he was then the personal lawyer to Donald Trump. That was the new title that he got after the inauguration. Well, that wasn't the case. Michael Cohen did, in fact, make money as the personal lawyer to to Donald Trump. But that's a whole other story, and it involves, if you'll remember correctly, Victor Vekselberg. Victor Vekselberg, can you believe that? A long time ago. Victor Vekselberg, a Russian oligarch who had put Michael Cohen on a retainer for his company that was owned by Intrata. I can remember Intrata's first name, but there you go. And my memory serves me correctly. There was that time that there was a commission paid to Michael Cohen on a consultancy basis as Donald Trump's key lawyer when he was in the White House. This was basically a bagman situation, basically taking bribes from various people, including, I believe, that came from Putin himself, perhaps, as a bribe to continue doing what he was doing. Okay, so I should note, as this headline points out before, that Trump was reportedly visibly angered when he left court today. Now, he often looks a little distressed and unhappy and bored and whatever. Today, apparently, he looked a little bit angry. And it could be, as I think it must be, that he realizes there's no way out for this first time in a long time. Sure, they might be able to get one jury here to say, hey, I'm not entirely convinced, I have some doubt, and therefore let's have a hung jury. But in reality, I think what we're going to see is that Michael Cohen today was able to connect the dots that were missing for the jury and for the viewers at home and for anyone in the public to really underline that this is, this was election fraud. This was their attempt and successful attempt to steal the elections by paying off somebody that was a campaign contribution, and that should never, never have happened without it being declared. Now, had it been declared, maybe they would have been okay, but they didn't declare it, and they couldn't declare it, of course, because they were trying to hush it up. But nevertheless, this is what we're seeing here, is that this Trump campaign in 2016 were illegally occupying the White House. These guys took over that White House having known that they made a crime, committed a crime on the way to the inauguration. They should never, ever, ever have contributed to the campaign with this hush money payment, and they should never have falsified documents, because that falsification of documents is what actually gets them at the end of the day. What a story. What an unbelievable story, as we're finding out exactly what happened in the attempt to steal the 2016 election and install Donald Trump as the president of the United States when he didn't deserve to be the president of the United States, when he hadn't won, in fact, fairly, and in fact had been influenced by Russian intelligence operations, as we previously indicated. On top of that, we now know he was supporting his campaign illegally by funding this payoff, this hush money to Stormy Daniels. It's all really unseemly and disgusting, and he should never be in the president of the United States at all. So put that in your whatever and smoke it if you are still considering voting for the man again. And of course, there's a lot amount of people who do. Now, I have in the past said many negative things about Michael Cohen, and let me say that I am a little bit impressed today that he came through in the way he did, but I am not going to say that I'm fully off the skeptic bench on Michael Cohen, because the guy was Donald Trump's fixer for 10 years, doing all sorts of nasty stuff to colleagues of mine, to people in the city, to people in the country. This guy is not a nice guy on the way to his redemption day, maybe, which today was. And so in the past, I've been quite critical of him. And I want to explain to you why. And so the Frontline PBS show a while ago did a very interesting take on Michael Cohen and what it was like for him to be the fixer. I'm going to play you that in just a few seconds. I did forget, however, to point out the other thing that happened today, which was finally the jury got to hear the smoking gun tape. There's one thing about the smoking gun document we showed you earlier on, but the smoking gun tape is a recording that Michael Cohen did of Donald Trump. And in that recording, Donald Trump is quite clearly saying, yeah, go ahead, do that deal that you need in order to get David Pecker to pay off Karen I always forget her last name, and I don't know why it is, but oh, how embarrassing. It'll come to me. Karen McDougal gets paid off by David Pecker, right? This is another case of this National Enquirer, David Pecker acting as a catch and kill operation, basically, for Donald Trump on his women, and that tape. Well, that tape exists, and the reason it exists is because Michael Cohen told us today he needed to prove to David Pecker that Donald Trump was good for the money. Let's listen to that tape, and then we'll come back on the other side of this. I'll play you that Frontline documentary.
We have a chance. He had an idea for you.
Okay. So we got served from the New York Times. I told you this regarding to unseal the divorce papers with Ivana. We're fighting it. Kaslowitz is going to
never be able to get that.
Never. Kaslowitz don't ever be able. They don't have a.
Give me a Coke, please.
They don't have a legitimate purpose.
And you
So
have a woman that doesn't want to unseal.
correct.
So you've been handling it.
yes, and it's
That's
all
been going on for a while.
for about 2-3 weeks now.
All you have to do is delay it for.
Even after that, it's not going to ever be opened. There's no purpose for it. Told you about Charleston. I need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David, so that I'm going to do that right away. I've actually come up and I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with
So what are we going to take?
funding. Yes, and it's all the stuff.
thinking about that.
All the stuff, because you never know where that company, you never know where he's going to be.
Gets hit by a truck.
Correct. So I'm all over that. And I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be.
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
Don't pay with cash.
no. I got no.
There you go. I'll pay with cash. No, is how it ends. And it ends like that because, Michael Cohen, if you believe him, said today he thought he had enough. He had enough information there to pay back to David Pecker. He had David Pecker, and any questions about whether Donald Trump was actually good for the money. It turns out that Donald was good for the money because he had the tape. So there you go. It's so interesting to see how all of this came together, and so amazing that we've seen this testimony come out. Now, there's a huge piece to this National Enquirer David Pecker investigation, which has not ever been discussed by anyone, because we've heard it related to 2 cases here involving 2 women, and we've heard it as well to the court case of the doorman, or the case of the doorman. So the 3 instances where the National Enquirer has been put on center stage as being sort of the blackmailer in chief, I don't know what you would call them, of Donald Trump and Donald Trump's campaign. The dirtier they could get, the worse it was. I mean, it's unbelievable that an outfit that calls itself a newspaper was able to become so dirty and disgusting. But there's much more to what Donald Trump knew about the National Enquirer and what David Pecker was sharing about the National Enquirer. And I'm going to be revealing that over the next few days. If there's time, I will reveal it tonight, but I don't know if we'll have enough time. But I might hint at some of it tonight because it's massive when you really start to realize the scope of what Donald Trump did with the National Enquirer and David Pecker, and who in the world funded that operation. But before we get there, let's talk about the redemption of Michael Cohen. Because as I've said to you before, Michael Cohen that I knew when I was a journalist in New York City, the Michael Cohen that many of us in the business have had to encounter in quite scandalous ways. He's done nothing personal to me ever, but boy, was his reputation well known in the city of New York. And this is an example of why he was considered such a bully. This came from a Frontline PBS documentary. I think it's 2018 or so, maybe 2019.
Cohen liked to brag that he was willing to take a bullet for his boss.
He portrayed himself as a tough guy. He was willing to sort of intimidate people on Trump's behalf, threaten people. He was a bully.
Cohen shielded Trump from bad press. One method, blunt threats to journalists.
Mark my words for it. I will make sure that you and I meet one day while we're in the courthouse, and I will take you for every penny you still don't have.
The call was to reporter Tim Mack at the Daily Beast.
So I'm warning you, tread very lightly, because what I'm going to do to you is going to be disgusting. Do you understand me? Don't think you're going to hide behind your pen, because it's not going to happen.
Michael Cohen just basically just threatens this guy like some kind of low-life thug.
I'm more than happy to discuss it with your attorney and with your legal counsel, because you're going to need it.
Cohen was infamous for his role in the Stormy Daniels story, orchestrating a hush money payment to the adult film star, who threatened to reveal a sexual encounter with Trump.
He cleans up messes. And an accusation about an affair, a demand for some kind of compensation to keep quiet, that's exactly the kind of problem that Cohen would like to try to solve for Donald Trump.
Michael is very good at killing stories. He's gotten Trump out of a lot of issues, I would say, and that was his job, and he's done a good job out of it.
Now Cohen was the target of a federal investigation, one which could expose the work he did for the president.
There is a ton that he could tell prosecutors.
A very real possibility that he's going to cooperate.
Reportedly is connected to the Stormy Daniels story. CNN called
the day of the Cohen raid, the White House insisted it was business as usual. They invited the press into a national security meeting. But Trump wanted to go on the attack.
Come on in, folks. Come on in. So I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys. Good man, and it's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt.
The president is so enraged and obsessed with what's just happened that he can't keep himself from talking about it. At a public briefing, he repeatedly uses the words disgrace, a disgrace.
And it's a disgrace. It's frankly a real disgrace. It's an attack on our country in a true sense.
Something clearly happens with the president after Michael Cohen comes under scrutiny from the Department of Justice. The president views that very much as a threat to him.
These people have the biggest conflicts of interest I've ever seen, and I have this witch hunt constantly going on for over 12 months now.
The investigation of Michael Cohen has to feel to the president like an arrow pointed directly at his chest. It has to feel that this is aimed precisely at uncovering the president's own history, both before he took office and since he took office, in ways that perhaps might be the most deeply sensitive to him.
This is a pure and simple witch hunt. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's a whole other avenue of potential exposure, criminal exposure to the president. This was clearly someone who was a very close advisor and attorney to the president, and who was especially involved in what might be seen as the president's shady business.
Cohen liked to brag that he was willing to take a bullet for his boss.
He portrayed himself as a tough guy. He was willing to sort of intimidate people on Trump's behalf, threaten people. He was a bully.
Cohen shielded Trump from bad press. One method, blunt threats to journalists.
Mark my words for it. I will make sure that you and I meet one day while we're in the courthouse, and I will take you for every penny you still don't have.
The call was to reporter Tim Mack at the Daily Beast.
So I'm warning you. Tread very lightly, because what I'm going to do to you is going to be disgusting. Do you understand me? Don't think you're going to hide behind your pen, because it's not going to happen.
Michael Cohen just basically just threatens this guy like some kind of lowlife thug.
I'm more than happy to discuss it with your attorney and with your legal counsel, because you're going to need it.
Cohen was infamous for his role in the Stormy Daniels story, orchestrating a hush money payment to the adult film star, who threatened to reveal a sexual encounter with Trump.
He cleans up messes. And an accusation about an affair, a demand for some kind of compensation to keep quiet, that's exactly the kind of problem that Cohen would like to try to solve for Donald Trump.
Michael is very good at killing stories. He's gotten Trump out of a lot of issues, I would say, and that was his job, and he's done a good job out of it.
Now Cohen was the target of a federal investigation, one which could expose the work he did for the president.
There is a ton that he could tell
A
prosecutors.
very real possibility that he's going to cooperate.
Reportedly is connected to the Stormy Daniels story. CNN
The day of the Cohen raid, the White House insisted it was business as usual. They invited the press into a national security meeting. But Trump wanted to go on the attack.
Come on in, folks. Come in. So I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt.
The president is so enraged and obsessed with what's just happened that he can't keep himself from talking about it. At a public briefing, he repeatedly uses the words disgrace, a disgrace.
And it's a disgrace. It's frankly a real disgrace. It's an attack on our country in a true sense.
Something clearly happens with the president after Michael Cohen comes under scrutiny from the Department of Justice. The president views that very much as a threat to him.
These people have the biggest conflicts of interest I've ever seen, and I have this witch hunt constantly going on for over 12 months now.
The investigation of Michael Cohen has to feel to the president like an arrow pointed directly at his chest. It has to feel that this is aimed precisely at uncovering the president's own history, both before he took office and since he took office, in ways that perhaps might be the most deeply sensitive to him.
This is a pure and simple witch hunt. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's a whole other avenue of potential exposure, criminal exposure to the president.
Well, I assume I'm back up live on Twitter, but I'm not sure I am yet. If I am and you can see me, let me know. I apologize for that. Something just happened. It's often been my suspicion that strange technological things happen on my show whenever I'm about to discuss something controversial, and this may have been one of those cases. So who knows? Who knows? Nevertheless, I believe I'm back live now on Twitter and also on YouTube and on Facebook and on Substack and on Patreon. I think I've only got 9 minutes left in the show here. Maybe I won't get to that very controversial thing that I wanted to talk about. But maybe I should. Maybe I should talk about that, because in those 9 minutes, a lot can be said, and maybe that's maybe helpful to people to understand why I'm so. I've changed my mind a lot about Michael Cohen, and I've changed my mind a lot about this particular case, because this case is not what it appears to be. At first blush. At first blush, I thought, well, what is this misdemeanor thing that they're trying to go after? Why did they do this misdemeanor? And then what is this, plussed up thing that you get if you falsify a document and then you do that in the furtherance of a crime? Now it becomes a felony. It's so complicated. Can't we just get a clean and easy trial like the espionage trial? That looked like it was going to be an easier one to prove. Now we know that one's not going to happen. We know that the other two are not likely to happen either. So here we are with this particular case. And originally I thought, well, this case has got nothing to do with elections. It's got everything to do with Stormy Daniels. And the more you look at it, the more you realize, well, it has everything to do with this election. And not only elections in general, but the election of 2016, where Donald Trump was elected president. I certainly believe he was not intended to be the president that year. I don't think he should have won. I don't think he did win. At the end of the day, I think if you look at all the interference that Russia, China, and others did, and when you look at the accumulation of, what Roger Stone was doing with the GRU and Guccifer, when you look at Paul Manafort handing over all that documentation, all that polling information to Kalimnik, there was a lot of, collusion, call it what you will, with Russia there. On top of that, you've got them doing these illegal payoffs to Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, and now this third person, this doorman, who alleged that Donald Trump had a baby with one of the maids. And so this is a much larger operation. And you start thinking to yourself, well, this operation, this David Pecker, Donald Trump pact to start sinking all these women who are going to come forward doing catch and kill. I mean, that's remarkable. Think about it. That's two main figures in America conspiring to hide the rapes and assaults and sexual abuses and God knows what else they had thought they were going to have to cover up of Donald Trump using one of the country's biggest newspapers. And, that has not escaped me since this whole thing came around. I've been like, the National Enquirer is not just your typical newspaper. The National Enquirer is the home of presidential affairs and scandals. I mean, if Donald Trump was busy getting himself covered up there, being defended by the National Enquirer, the home of every lurid detail about every single other president, well, how come? How come Donald Trump is getting the special David Pecker agreement to be taken, not to have any dirt of his splashed across the newspapers on the grocery checkout counters? And then I got to thinking, well, there's not just that case. I mean, there have been other cases involving scandals that the National Enquirer did in relation to the 2016 election. In fact, it was in the pages of the 2016 election of the National Enquirer, the 2016 election scandal, the biggest of them all, involving Bill Clinton on Jeffrey Epstein's island. That was first published in the National Enquirer, of all places. David Pecker's National Enquirer, that Donald Trump seemed to have some sort of deal with to cover up his own, messy scandals. Well, not only that, they were also alleging scandals about his chief opponent's husband. That is unusual and different and should not just be ignored in the case that we're looking at here. So I have not really prepped this for live, but because of what just happened, I feel like it's time to make sure that, things come to the surface, because the more we try to reveal things, the more things get hidden. And the remaining few minutes that I have here, let me just share with you what I found out. briefly. You may find this interesting. You may think I'm making it up, but this is, where am I? This is January the 6th, 2015. The National Enquirer has a headline, world exclusive, Prince Andrew, teen sex slave tells all. That's Virginia Giffrey there on the cover of the National Enquirer. She, during that January the 6th, 2015, well, look at the dates there, January the 6th, 2015, reveals that, she was the sex slave of Prince Andrew in that Jeffrey Epstein scandal, which, I know very well here on Narrative. Look what happens a few weeks later on January the 22nd, 2015. This is 2015, remember? Way before we'd seen an election campaign start, but also involving the same players. January 22nd, 2015. Bill Clinton pedophile, sex slave confirms inquiry. So here on January the 22nd, you've got Bill caught in a teen sex ring. Bill Clinton's pedophile's a sex slave confirms, Inquirer reports, sex orgy with Prince Andrew. So suddenly the story involving Prince Andrew and Virginia Giffrey, suddenly it becomes Bill Clinton's story. And then, of course, Bill Clinton was caught in the teen sex ring as well. So now we're seeing, well before Donald Trump even started his election campaign, he and David Pecker were starting to float the story about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. This continues. On January the 29th in 2015, there's Prince Andrew and the sex slave caught on video this time. On video. Now, how do they get their hands on the video? This is Jeffrey Epstein's video, apparently, of Andrew with Virginia Giffrey, and so on and so on and so on. So let's take a look. One other headline, January 15th, we've shown you this one already. So this is interesting on its own, right? I mean, on its own, you just think, well, it's interesting. The National Enquirer is also running a story about Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein's supposed sex romps and Prince Andrew's supposed sex romp. Nothing about Donald Trump's sex romps with Jeffrey Epstein in the pages of the National Enquirer, which was also alleged, as you know, at the time. And so let me posit this to you, if I may, that, when in February of 2015, a guy by the name of Donald Trump appears on the stage of CPAC, the conservative organization CPAC, and Donald Trump is being interviewed by Hannity, Sean Hannity of Fox News. Isn't it interesting that he says about Bill Clinton, sorry about the way this appears here, but you'll get to see it, nice guy, got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with a famous island with Jeffrey Epstein, lots of problems. CPAC, February 2015, with Hannity. Donald Trump's words saying, nice guy about Bill Clinton, lots of problems coming up, in my opinion. Connected with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein, that's coming up, previewing what was coming up in the case against Bill Clinton. And this is all, this is public record. I'm not revealing anything that you can find online yourself. So if anyone's as nervous as I am putting this out, you'll know I'm nervous just because I have been consistently attacked by people for doing these kind of reports that are truthful and accurate and share with you what's going on. And I'll leave you with this one note here, that David Pecker, just in weeks earlier, and this might cut out in the next few seconds, but David Pecker, weeks earlier said, this is from Sam Nunberg saying, Michael was sitting in there when I came in, and the issue of the National Enquirer with the pictures of Prince Andrew was on his desk, Nunberg recalled. He said not to tell anyone, but that Pecker had just been there and had brought the issue with him. Trump said that Pecker had told him that the pictures of Clinton that Epstein had from his island were worse. Why was Donald Trump in the office with Michael Cohen? Why were they sharing photographs of, or seeing the cover from David Pecker before it had been released, of Prince Andrew and Virginia Giffrey? Why had it become a habit of David Pecker to share the covers of the National Enquirer with Donald Trump and Michael Cohen at the Trump Organization? Why had that happened? And why was he alleging now that the pictures were worse of Bill Clinton on the island? And why was this given to Donald Trump, who could then go onto the stage at CPAC and declare to the world that Bill Clinton was a nice guy with a lot of problems coming up, with a famous island with Jeffrey Epstein, lots of problems. So when I say I have questions about Michael Cohen, I have lots of questions about Michael Cohen. But this is where I have a great amount of interest to know exactly how far the David Pecker Donald Trump deal went, because it went very far. And I think there's a lot more to be said about this story, and we'll leave it here tonight because I've reached the maximum amount of time I've been on the air. I wasn't even going to do this tonight, but when we get cut off like that, I don't like it. So I want to get as much information out as I can, just in case. So my thanks to you for being here tonight. It's been another fantastic hour of television, whatever this is. I enjoy hanging out with you. Big news today. Big news. Don't let this last few minutes here deter you from enjoying that whiff of potential success that might be coming soon. I'm not saying the jury will in any way convict Donald Trump. I'm sure there'll be plenty of reasons for them to find a little shred of doubt, as they've always done with anything related to Michael Cohen and Donald Trump. But truthfully, this was a remarkable day for those of us who have been working hard to see the justice is done, the truth is told for Donald Trump, because there was not much room for him to run. There's not many places he can go now that we know that he was in the room with Alan Weisselberg, in the room with Michael Cohen as they were concocting this deal to defraud create these fraudulent business statements in furtherance of a federal election crime, that they had conspired to steal the election by suppressing the story. They conspired to steal the election by not declaring the amount that they should have to the Federal Election Committee for suppressing the story. And then in the waning days of that election campaign, where it was so close, they conspired to hide all of this. They conspired to hide this criminal activity just so they could steal the presidency and do so in an illegal way. And it's very difficult for anybody to argue against that. However, there is room for doubt in the story. And, because Donald Trump has no emails, no computers, you name it, that in fact, it's quite possible that they'll be able to find a way to get him off. Who knows? That's the show for tonight. I keep forgetting to tell you this, guys. I need your support. So please, it's a one-man show. You see what it's like for me to do it every week. It takes a lot of research, a lot of technical finagling to make sure this looks like a half-decent show for you. I do not have hundreds of people supporting me on the scene and behind the scenes, anything like that, like the traditional TV networks. I have a few hundred very, very loyal and faithful patrons and supporters, and I thank you very much for being there with me throughout this incredible journey. Without you, I don't think a huge amount of the story of the Donald Trump story would have ever emerged. So I thank you very much for your support throughout the years. However, if you're not a supporter of Narrative and you come here and you watch the show every week, because I like to keep it free for everybody, now is a good time to become a supporter. You can do it by going to Substack, that's narrative, NARATIV.substack.com, or go to patreon.com/narrative, or go to youtube.com/@narrative.tv. Wherever it is you decide to support us, just support us. The next 6 months of this election campaign will determine the future of freedom in the world, will determine the future of human rights in the world, will determine the future of democracy in the world, will determine the future for your kids and grandkids, and whether capitalism will still be a thing, and whether you'll be able to speak your mind as freely as we can, sort of speak our mind as freely as you can today. These things are so valuable. They're priceless. They're not worth risking a Donald Trump election. We need to hold onto the rights that our forefathers have for years been fighting for and have been able to get for us. We need to fight for these things and keep them. And by supporting Narrative, you know that you have a very authentic, true voice, and someone who believes in exactly this, who believes in truth in reporting, who believes in justice, who believes in this kind of transparency that I've been providing you for the last 8 years as I've been covering the Trump Russia and Trump whatever scandal that's happened since then. For 8 years, we've been covering story after story after story, just because someone needs to be doing it, and someone needs to be doing it in a truthful way, unencumbered by the way my colleagues in the networks are, where I know you can't get stories on the air because there are certain topics. Like if someone wants to try run that National Enquirer Jeffrey Epstein story tomorrow, good luck. Good luck. I'd like to see it on the national networks tomorrow. You won't see it because you can only see it here. So do me a favor, folks. If you can afford it, it's $8 a month. Send me whatever you can. It's getting really difficult for me to survive without it. And And, I love this more than anything else. I'm not about to give up, but I could use your help. I really could use your help. With that, have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.